Hello there, welcome back to el podcast del Salón de Idiomas. And here with me we have Robin Gravina. Hi Robin, how are you doing?
Good. Hi, Alfonso. It's nice to see you again, and nice to be doing this podcast for Salón de Idiomas. Here we are in Alicante, in the cold, and
Wow.
ready to talk about whatever you fancy talking about.
Yeah, well, we couldn't be further from each other, as a matter of fact, because I'm in the north right now. So,
Right.
for those who don't know, Robin is the Business Development Manager for LanguageCert in Spain and Portugal, okay? And we're going to be talking about today about some common questions that people might have regarding LanguageCert. And of course, perhaps any updates that are in the table or something that might interest our listeners. So, are we ready to start, Robin?
Yeah. Happy. Here we are, ready to go.
Fantastic. Great. So let's go with something very simple. And well, we have to say something that it's quite positive since LanguageCert has expanded very quickly in Spain and Portugal. And from your perspective, what has been the key factor behind that growth?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I think. Well, there's several answers. One is that that the exam is promoted by the exam centres,
Mm-hmm.
like Salon. And, I have to give credit to the network of exam centres because they've worked very hard in getting the messages out. It's always difficult to launch a new product when everyone's very familiar with what there already is. Um, and the kind of messages that they've been getting out are it's not like what you would expect, like it's easy or it's cheap or whatever. It's actually messages kind of aimed at academic things. A lot of people want to do an English exam, whether it's to learn English, whether it's to travel, whether it's for a job. And it's a process. People they have to learn English. It takes years. And so what they want is to learn English. And what teachers want to do is teach English
Yeah.
rather than teaching an exam. And, you combine that with, the fact it doesn't have a use of English. It's not grammar focused. It's communication focused. And so that gives students an opportunity to talk about themselves, to express what they really think
Yeah.
about their own lives, and to develop, the kind of skills you need to talk in a meeting. You know what it's like. You have to be able to improvise and use your language in a way that gets people's attention. And at the same time, teachers can teach that,
Uh huh.
and they don't have to do this terrible suffering that happens in a lot of school classrooms where you have to learn the 95 longest rivers of Europe in every class. It's just like memorizing, sitting there, and you copy and copy. So I think people have realized you can use the English class for something a lot more useful and not only for English.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say that one of the things that I have loved the most about language search is that, ironically, it sometimes makes me forget that I'm an English teacher, and sometimes I feel like a speech coach.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, that's actually exactly. I think I might have to record you and use you for some kind of real video because that's there's a lot of. I don't know if you know oracy, which is kind of becoming
Uh huh.
a big thing in schools,
Yeah.
like in the English speaking world. And it's a bit like, this kind of American model where you show and tell, you bring in something and, this is my so and so, and I want to tell you a story about it and I want to explain. And which is why American kids, are confident.
Yeah.
They're used to it. They're used to standing up in front of their classmates and talking about something. And you get your average Spanish kid and you say stand up in front of your classmates and talk about, and they'll just go, you know. And so, yeah, if you're not going to do it in Spanish, do it in English and, get those skills of feeling comfortable as you talk because it's one of the most important things for your life, and if you can do it in two languages, whoa,
Yeah, yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. I have to say that in most cases with my students, every time there is like a part of the speaking part that requires that we have to talk to each other at first, they are completely taken aback and overwhelmed, and they don't want to like have to do with any of that. They're like, I don't like this test. I don't like talking. Like, why do I have to like talk like with you? I'm so intimidated. But then later on, when we understand some structures like how like improvisation skills, as well as some ways to organize their speech, they end up liking those parts more. They're like, oh my god, that's just a piece of cake, of course. Now let's do part two again. Let's do part three again, because like those are the best parts. It's always like that, and I think that it's great that LanguageCert has always brought that part that is really nice to communicate with people, and being able to properly communicate is something that feels completely great, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, it reminds me of, there's some people are kind of more comfortable inventing their life than telling their real life.
Oh yeah.
And I remember like teaching some kids, when I say kids, like 18-year-olds a few years ago. And, like a typical teacher, you start off with, so how was your weekend? What did you do? And they would just go like, my friends, a film. And, now I would like lose my calm
Yeah.
to say it correctly, and say, actually, I don't really care what you did. If you didn't do anything, just invent something. The whole point is to talk about something,
Yeah.
and just invent a story. Say that, you went, um, I don't know, deep sea fishing off Alaska, just invent a story because it'll be more fun.
Yeah.
And after a while, people realize, you can both talk about yourself, which is great. It kind of, a lot of people, it makes it more real, it makes it more emotionally connected. Or you can just, you can role play, or you can act, or you can. The whole point is to kind of find something that you're comfortable with,
Yeah.
and you can express yourself.
Yeah, and of course, the more capable you are with coming up with these great stories, the easier it's gonna get to have a good mark in the test. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have to keep
totally.
that in mind.
And
Okay.
also, like what it's like in real life. There's, the people who get on are able to kind of, engage and get people's attention and talk about stuff
Hmm.
in a way that's attractive.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about teaching, when schools or teachers are new to language cert, what's the first thing that they usually have that you usually have to clarify or correct about the exams?
I don't know if it's about the exams, but it might be about teaching, because people like, they're I'm not going to mention any other exam boards, but a lot of teachers are used to following the book that prepares the exam, and are used to doing a lot of mock exams, and they want to do a lot of exam questions, and they want to do a lot of practice in the exam,
Hmm.
because, it's like, for those of you who are Spanish, the Spanish driving test, the what you do is you basically do about 50 simulation exams until you know the questions and you pass. And a lot of teachers are teaching like this. They're teaching English like this. And it's like you say, no, hang on a second. You can use any book you want. You don't have to do a lot of exam practice. People have to be familiar with how the structure is. It's very quick and easy.
Yeah.
And it gives you all this freedom that you can actually develop as a teacher and teach with a book that you like using, or not using a book, or in whichever way. You have to kind of teach English and get beyond this mentality of everything is focused on the exam. It's like, let's forget that. Let's teach
Correct.
English and forget about that.
Correct. And as a matter of fact, I see that the most when I have to teach like language cert lessons with students that have had lessons with other teachers from even from our same academy. Like they have had a completely different method, and in many cases, like yeah, I like their method. Everything works perfectly fine, and it's just interesting how like we can just bring our own style of teaching, and in the end, the result is the same. That they actually are successful and they get the mark that they desire.
Yeah, yeah. What's your style of teaching? How do you do it?
Well, the thing that I like the most in this case is like making sure that they know what to say in a certain specific order, especially for those who are like completely blank. Every time they talk,
Mm.
I try to teach them like some speaking frameworks in order for them to have like some kind of an idea of how to say things. I always say to them, well, perhaps you don't know what you're going to say right now, but at least you know how you're going to say it. And that
So like,
actually makes
yeah.
a tremendous difference. In the end, they actually end up feeling more comfortable, and whatever they say, they're like, okay, now I know that I have to say something that is about this. So, and then they start figuring it out, and I see great results with that.
It's a great technique. I think they call it scaffolding sometimes,
Hmm.
whereby you're building the scaffolding. We don't know what's on it yet, but you've got the structure that you can use to for different situations.
Correct, correct. Now, this is also taking me to the next question, which is about flexibility. And LanguageCert is well famous for being like talking about flexibility. And in practical terms, what does that actually mean for senders and candidates?
It means, I mean, flexibility in terms you can book it quickly. You don't have to book it a long time before the exam date. You can choose your exam date, and you get the results quicker. So, I mean, I guess one example is, a lot of people like to do an intensive course in July. School finishes, studies finish, you can concentrate and spend a few hours a day dedicated to English and hopefully make a kind of a leap in your level. And I guess traditionally what happens is, you sign up an academy, the academy doesn't know who they're going to get. They don't know what your level is, but you had to register for the exam in June. So it's too late to register to do the exam at the end of the course. Plus, there's not a date at the end of the course. There's a date like a week before the end of the course or in August, which means you can't do it. And now it's something you can do. You can sign up for a course. 2 weeks into the course, the teacher can say, okay, you're ready for C1, you're ready for B2.
Hmm.
You can sign up and you can do the exam like literally the last day of your course. So you're not wasting any time. And from the school's point of view, all the students are they're there until the end of the course and they're making the most of their time. That's one example about how flexibility can really benefit people.
I think that that is one of the best ways as how LanguageCert has adapted to our hectic lifestyles nowadays. Because like everything is unexpected and now everything needs to be so immediate. So I believe that for those like it resonates quite well for those who cannot plan ahead that much. Like it's not that they are disorganized. It's not that they're a mess. It's like it's just that everything is just coming into place all at once. So I cannot tell you that I'm gonna be available to doing X, Y, or Z in 2 months because I don't know. So I need I need a little bit more flexibility, and I think that language search is really good at offering that.
It's totally true. I mean, instant gratification. Not sure it's a good thing, but if the rest of the world operates like that, you need to fit in with it. And like teachers, another good example. Teachers, we know that they're very busy. High school teachers, they're in class from like 8, 9 until 5. They may have after school activities. They probably have kids,
Yeah.
and so the only way they can study is really online. I know that Salon does a lot of online classes too for teachers, and the only way they can do an exam, and a lot of times, is at night when everyone's gone to bed.
Yeah.
And Language Cert does online exams, which are really suitable for teachers. They can do it in their own time, at a time where they know they're not going to be bothered,
Yeah.
and they can fit that into their schedules because it's not only, I guess, the instant gratification. It's also that life is really complicated
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah, and it's virtually available whenever at whatever time you want. Like if you want to take the test on I don't know Christmas Eve, and you can do it on your own. Like
Yeah,
it might not be what you really want, but you
yeah.
can.
You can get up at 4 in the morning and you can do a 3 hour C1 exam before going to school.
Great. So now, are there any recent updates or features in language search exams that you feel haven't received as much attention as they deserve?
There's been a lot of work on exams on recognition above all.
Mm-hmm.
There's like we have in Spain we mainly do the ESOL exams, which are the kind of ones that everyone does in schools and so on. But we also do exams for immigration. And the big news for Language Cert was that we were recognised by Australia and New
Wow.
Zealand for immigration. So it's like for Spain, it's not a huge thing, but obviously Middle East, India,
Yeah.
China, it's massive, because there's a huge amount of immigration. So we're really happy about that because it shows that, important government organizations have audited, studied, vetted the exams, found them to be good and appropriate. And so things are growing very quickly in that area.
Wow. I mean, I perhaps this is taking it a little bit beyond that, but I believe that it feels so. I believe that it's such a privilege to be kind of like the way that you're going to open the door to these new cultures, to these countries, and like, of course, the way that they also learn English is by learning about English cultures in all its forms. So it doesn't feel like such a privilege to be able to be like the face of that.
It feels amazing because, ultimately what you're doing is helping people achieve their dreams. It sounds kind of like one of those glamorous advertising slogans, but it's the reality. People are empowered by the language they learn, especially English, which is, it can get you out of, quite a difficult life into having a whole change in your circumstances. It can get you to live a different place, it can get you to meet people. People can even get married and stuff
Yeah.
through, through it. So it's really, I mean, for me, working in this sector, it's like it does help to remember, quite often why you're doing it,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
sometimes, like any job, it can seem like a bit, well, every day is kind of the same. But when you think about it, when you hear people who've really done that, who've kind of left, very humble circumstances and managed to change their lives and get into some like great university
Yeah.
or to go into a great country and get a job and so on, then you think, wow, this is like really enabling people who have that drive to achieve what they want to do.
Yeah, that is definitely the greatest pat on the back, huh?
That's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Wonderful. Now, speaking of people when they're taking the exam, from the feedback that you receive, what aspect of the language search exams do candidates tend to find most reassuring once they have taken the exam?
Well, that's a good question and difficult to answer. I mean, I remember we did this big project in Murcia with high school students aged 16, and it was like it was a government project, so it was a government tender, which meant that nobody knew what exam they were going to get because nobody knew who was going to win the tender. In the end, Language Cert won the tender, but we didn't win it until like after term had ended. So, so we had to do the exams at the beginning of the next term. And, clearly they'd had zero preparation for the exam.
Okay.
Um, they'd had zero classes about the exam. They hadn't seen it before, and I went down there to see, to make sure everything was going okay. And, went to several schools, watched the kids come out of class, and they were all like, happy and smiling and laughing, and I was like, did you enjoy that? They were all like, yeah, 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 yeah. And I have to say I've done the same with other exam boards, and it's not not the same story, I'm afraid. There's a lot of stress and a lot of worry. And I think it's pretty clear when you take the exam whether you've done well or not, because there's no trick questions. It's not like, oh, did I forget to answer that? Did I kind of not understand that right? Did I not? What was it they were really looking for?
Hmm.
It's like, I did my best. I know I can do it. I showed that I can do it. And, if you do that, probably at the right level, you'll pass. It's not that complicated. So people feel good about it because they're feeling it's not a kind of exam that looks for punishing you for your mistakes. It's rewarding people for their competence.
Exactly. Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Yeah, they're not expecting you to know the exam. They expect you to know English. That's it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and if you do, then don't worry. You'll do fine.
Correct. Okay, great. Now, um, this question that I have over here, it's funny because I kind of know the answer of it, as we were together in the partners meeting in Madrid. But how does language search support centers beyond just delivering exams, especially in terms of training, communication, and partnership?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of aspects to that. It's it because you've been there.
Yeah.
But an exam center, like obviously we want them to do a lot of exams, which means there's a commercial aspect to it. They have to visit institutions and explain. They have to execute exams, and they have to execute them correctly under, we're monitored by the UK government, qualifications authority, Ofqual. So they have to do it correctly, and they have to know the instructions, um, and they have to learn the systems about booking candidates, getting results, which is not always as straightforward as it might be. So plus being an exam center is a weird job. It's if you haven't done it before, it's weird because I mean, I say that about myself. How did I end up effectively selling exams? It's kind of a strange. You're trying to explain it to people at a party or something. What do you do? Oh, I sell exams. It's like
What?
you weirdo. You
Are
know.
you walking down the store and I get you want to take a test?
Yeah, so it's odd, but I mean, what we try and do is have training both in the technical aspects of how to do it, but also in the kind of messages and how you work on promoting something within education.
Yeah.
So it's and people they do understand.
Hmm.
It's not a big commercial thing. It's like you've got something that helps people, and you go into a school and you start talking about discounts and money and commissions and stuff, and they'll look at you like, what are you talking about? Why are you here? So it's we try and the other thing we try and do, as you said, the meeting is get people together. We believe in a kind of a collaborative approach to things in general, life, business, rather than a kind of everyone's got their little secrets and stuff. So we do try and get people to help each other and to share best practice, to kind of tell the stories of what they've done, and to help other people kind of grow their own businesses and grow within the whole language cert ecosystem, if you like.
Yeah, I have to say that I love that approach, since I have to admit, uh, a little bit within me, I was expecting people to be a little bit more closed or more at least just aloof, of being like,
Mm,
I don't wanna share you how I make money, because like you're gonna make money and then I won't. But in the end, it's actually not like that. It was completely the opposite. People were very willing to share their ideas, and it was not like we're not competing against each other. We're actually just collaborating with each other, and of course, we're expecting the best for each of us. So that was one of the greatest experiences. And from my experience as an interlocutor of LanguageCert, I have to say that that experience has helped me tremendously to be a better teacher when it comes to like the mistakes that I made. Like I when I was starting, I made a couple of mistakes, but LanguageCert was just very clear with what were my flaws and how I could improve on what I should do during the exam to make sure that the candidate was was reflecting all the things that they knew. And then after taking a deeper look at it, I was like, wow, now I have a better understanding of what are the things that I should be doing right now so I can deliver my lessons more properly and see what is expected from them in the exam. And it has been like night and day after that, I have to admit.
well, I'm glad to hear that, because that's the idea. I mean, we have the people who write the exams. It's a team of people who are experts in assessment, and everything they do is kind of around the philosophy of making something
Mm-hmm.
communicative and making something, um, but also reflecting good teaching practice and reflecting the all the areas of the language, and obviously with the common framework, with like B2, which says you are able, I can do this, I can do that, I can express my opinion. And so they're constantly trying to develop the exam and develop new questions, um, that are fit into that philosophy, that are real. And I've as a teacher, I used to be a teacher. I haven't done it for a while, but I always found that the realer you make it, um, the more people get engaged with it, and the more they feel like it's something that's useful for them.
Yeah.
If you have this kind of class that's like, today we're going to talk about ecology, read this article, and then it's like, I don't actually feel like talking about ecology. We talk about it every bloody week. Um, I'd much rather talk about myself. So like anything that you do that brings in kind of real world stuff and takes from the students, rather than giving to the students,
Yeah,
is
and
going to get engagement.
yeah, because they notice that it's not that you are like just filling your role as like the robot that has to be in front of them vomiting information to them. No, it's that person
Yeah,
that actually wants you to learn, and they are as engaged as you are in the learning process.
yeah, exactly. I mean, and you can talk about, there's a lot of people who talked about and wrote about language teaching years ago who saw that. And then, in a way, which is going to sound strange coming from somebody whose livelihood is exams, kind of part of the problem is exams. Because it used to be that uh, you know I'm talking about like 30 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
used to go and all the language schools had like, pre-intermediate one, pre-intermediate two, upper intermediate. There was no like, B1 preparation, B2 preparation. And then, all of a sudden it became, people started wanting certificates, perhaps because of the universities, perhaps because of bilingual teachers. Um, and so the academies started doing, exam preparation courses. Fine,
Mm-hmm.
except when you do nothing else, and I remember teaching for exams, and all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, there's so much to do in the way of like, sentence manipulation, um, prefixes, suffixes, and they're not going to do it at home, so you have to do it in class, and it's like, oh my God, this is boring. So it's kind of like, it's you can have both. You can have an exam that's not an exam on the exam, if you know what I mean. It's like on the preparation book for the exam. It's an exam about English, and so I understand people want qualifications. It's a competitive world. You need them to get on, and people are very keen on checking them out. But you don't have to sacrifice the kind of what can be a really enriching experience in order to do that.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'm glad because like that definitely sounds like very reassuring for anybody who's preparing for the language cert exam. They have to. It's just what we were mentioning a moment ago. They have to understand that even though they are preparing for the test, they are not necessarily only learning for the test, and it's all about just learning English and make it as engaging as possible. Great. Now, now let's talk about a little bit about the future and without of course revealing anything confidential, like people are gonna listen to this. Are there any general trends or directions language search is currently focusing on to the future?
Another good question. I mean, in the world of assessment, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, um, both for creating questions and even for marking. Um, and I'd be lying if I said that we weren't looking at that and seeing if it's reliable and seeing if it works and seeing if it's any good. Obviously, everything, before using anything, you have to test it like massively. I mean, the world is becoming more, quick, quick, quick. So, like, clearly people want the exams to be shorter if they can be shorter. I'm not sure that's going to happen
Mm-hmm.
or not. Um, People, it's becoming, immigration is becoming a huge issue worldwide. It's becoming quite a controversial subject in
Yeah.
many countries, and people are interested in very high standards for immigration. Some people because they don't want any more immigrants in, or because they want to restrict the standard of people, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
There's the whole debate about, is online testing more secure than face-to-face testing? How do you deal with, malpractice and people trying to con and fiddle the system, which is a constant thing. So, I mean, all of those things are there in the world of language
Yeah.
testing, and they have to be addressed, in a serious way, looked at. But you have to remember that with language testing, your mission is to be accurate and to be fair. To avoid any kind of cultural favoritism. any kind of world knowledge favoritism,
Hmm.
any kind of, thing that favors one particular group over another. And so like everything that we do is focused on, creating validated, confirmed evidence that the exam is doing what it's supposed to do. So like, there's new technologies and stuff which may be incorporated, but without losing sight of the actual intention of the exam.
Yeah, I have to say that that's one of the biggest challenges that I believe that any kind of exam has to face. Like, how do you ensure that the test is going always going to be, let's say, equally difficult or for any person regarding wherever they are.
Mm.
That's a very interesting that's a very interesting take, and I believe that of course, making sure that this is always as reliable and it's always as rigorous as LanguageCert is, has to be one of the biggest challenges, right?
It's complicated. I mean, the questions have to go through a big
Mm-hmm.
editing and vetting procedure. You can't like have a question about ice hockey,
Yeah.
for example, which relies on somebody having specific knowledge about ice hockey. You could have a text about ice hockey if you're asking questions that are just within the text and don't rely that you know about the sport.
Yeah.
Um, and it's something that I think gets built in. So the people who do questions,
Yeah.
they have like a very good radar on something that's only going to be answered by people in the first world, for example, but in the third world not. Um, that's more favorable to men or to women or to any
Correct.
particular thing. And it's something that's always there because it's the whole point is to do that. And then there's of course there's testing. You test the questions on different populations, different cohorts from different places with
Mm-hmm.
different levels, and you kind of see what they do, how they answer the questions, and if that kind of information jives with what they've also done in the exam, then you can pretty much guarantee that it's correct. It's a good question.
I'm glad
But
to hear
if there's like something is off in some place, then you start to think, okay, maybe this question is not a fair question for everybody, or maybe it's not an accurate question, or it's
that. Yeah.
not measuring what it wanted to measure.
So I guess that we can basically say that it's always in constant revision, and we have to, and there we're always ensuring that whatever you're delivering is not just something that we thought it was a good idea 10 years ago and that's it. No, we're constantly evolving and making sure that what you have is the best product that you can have.
Yeah, I mean, modern language tests are kind of, it's a very scientific thing, and there's like a huge dependence on statistics
Mm-hmm.
and on computer systems to measure each question. How difficult is it? Um, how valid is it? And then to kind of take all of those analyses, put them together to make a whole exam. So, and obviously you need to be constantly writing new questions. You need to be constantly testing them. You need to be constantly producing new exam papers. Um, so it never stops,
Yeah,
and it's something that is a constant kind of research, production, feedback, improve, and repeat.
I see. I see. Great. Now, what advice would you give to a center that is considering adding language cert alongside other exam options?
Go for it,
As simple as that. Just go for
and as
it.
simple as that. Go for it. Yeah. No, I mean it's difficult. I understand that people get used to something and they don't want to change. I mean, I think what we've talked about this whole chat about the benefits to the students are like something that really really you should be looking at. You combine that with the flexibility, with the recognition, with the kind of ease of execution, and it becomes something that you can really, you don't have to get rid of your other exams. Every exam has its fan club.
Mm-hmm.
There's some exams with a very academic kids, they love it. The people who like really love word games and crosswords and things. But there's a lot of people who speak English and they're not particularly academic. They're just like, they use it for their lives and they can do stuff. And language cert is for them. There's a lot of people who want an exam that is easy to pass, and I say, well, fine, but where's your ambition? You know what I mean? If whether you're a teacher or whether you're a student, like where's your ambition?
Yeah,
Why would you want, like taking an exam that's just like, you pass it, whatever you do, what's the point of getting up
yeah.
in the morning even, it's not really worth it. And what else can I say? If an academy wants to join up, then we're nice people, we're a nice club, we're a nice group of people, and you'd be very welcome to join.
I can say that that's definitely true. That's definitely true. It's a great group to be in, so come on in. Okay, so Robin, I just have one more question. Okay,
Fine.
if you could change one assumption that you have seen overall regarding language search, what would that be?
I've never heard of it.
Really?
No, I mean there's because we knew um, there's the probably the in a lot of Spain now people have heard of it, but you do get what's that? So
Yeah.
the one assumption would be that this is like a small exam produced by a small company that's not that serious. It's like
Yeah.
LanguageCert is a very big company. It's a very multinational company. It's got presence all over the place, and so I think the assumption is that you may think this now, but give us a few years, and I don't think anyone will be saying who's LanguageCert.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I have to say that that's one thing that perhaps it's not really annoying me, but definitely it's just like it makes you me sigh when students say like, "Is this test like actually you know recognized? It's not just like you scamming me or something." It's like, no,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
mean, it's
that.
terrible, with like, I mean, it's like in every field of life, all these like internet forums and chat groups and whatever. And, people just say stuff and they write nonsense, like, you see it on all social media. People just invent stuff.
That's
And and you see that, and you see that and they just say, "Oh, it's not valid for this or whatever." And, just not only with language cert and with exams, but with your whole lives, people do some research before you believe something.
great. That's great advice. Thank you, Robin. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming here and talking to me and talking to us and our audience. We love what you have heard, and well, before you leave, would you like to say something to our listeners here in Salon de Idiomas?
Sure. Well, I think you're making a great decision in working with Salon. Salon are also nice people. Um, they do a great job and they make some very nice cakes and tea. So if you're an online customer, student of Salon, make sure you go there because you're going to get a nice cake.
Thank you so much, Robin. Well, that will be it for today. I hope that you liked the video and subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for coming. And I'll see you in the next one. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Robin, and take care.
A
Bye.
pleasure. Thank you. Bye.